Welcome to Our Journey to Equity, a podcast all about turning passion into tangible impact, alchemizing the shared desire for equity into actions and engaging conversations that expose health and social injustices and empower us with the tools and information we need to protect our right to live healthy lives. Together, we'll explore the power of community voices in achieving health equity for people of color. It's time to make a difference. Together, we can create a future where health equity is a reality for all. Join Tamara and her guests on Our Journey to Equity.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Our Journey to Equity. I am Tamara Smith. I am a healthcare executive and a health equity practitioner. And as you all know, Our Journey to Equity is a series where we are interviewing and being introduced to different health equity practitioners along their own journey, learning about their life experiences to learn how we can advocate for ourselves, our communities, and for our families. Today, I am so excited to take a deep dive into the journey with Mr. Jamil Welch. I'm going to let Jamil introduce himself to you all. But as you know, we don't journey alone. I'm going to kick us off, Jamil, share a little bit about my own journey, what brought us here together, and then we want to take a deep dive into your journey to equity and how you landed where you are today. Okay, sound good?
Yes,
all right.
Sounds good.
Wonderful. Well, as many of you know, if you've been following along, you know a little bit about my journey, but for those of you that do not, when I started down this pathway into health equity, it was actually truly a discovery process because the language for health equity really did not exist at the time. I knew from growing up that my family's experiences were very different from many of the white counterparts that I grew up around because I grew up in suburban Atlanta and obviously a lot of white neighborhoods and white spaces. And so the contrast was always very, very evident for me. And so I didn't have the language, but I could see, right? Sometimes like you don't necessarily need somebody to tell you something is different when you're experiencing something different every single day and your family is experiencing things that are different every single day. And so for me, it was more of a, how do I do work in healthcare that actually helps remove the difference? And so I was always sort of pointing towards a much more advocacy focused perspective in the work that I wanted to do. At one point, I even thought about being a lawyer because I knew that there was something about justice that wasn't happening in our community. And I think we fast forward today, and with everything that happened in 2020, the social justice movement really took off. It's all connected, right? So if you're not in good health because you're part of a minoritized and marginalized population, there are many other factors that are also affecting your ability to thrive economically, your ability to thrive socially, your ability to thrive from a healthcare standpoint. So when I talk about health equity, my journey to health equity, it's inclusive of all of those factors that impact minoritized, marginalized populations and our ability to thrive within the systems that we live in. And that's really, long story short, there's so much more in between there, but I share a little bit as we go throughout. But we're not here for me. So I'm gonna leave mine at a high level and we're gonna deep dive into Jamil. We're entering this journey together with you. Can you introduce yourself and just share with everybody a little bit about your journey?
Sure. So Jamil Welch, by title, Director of Patient Access and Reimbursement Services for a pharmaceutical company, right? Essentially what that means is I assist patients with getting access to therapy, be it through their insurance carrier or through free goods programs, right? So there are programs such as patient assistance programs, quick start programs for those who need to get access to therapy relatively quickly, and then bridge programs for those who are having challenges with, they may have lost a job and now they're entering into a space where they now need, some coverage as a bridge, quote unquote, for them to get access to therapy from their new insurance carrier, their new job. So that's my day to day. Grew up in Newark, New Jersey. Which is an urban environment. Clearly, there's some clear things that you will see growing up in the urban environment that are quite different from the more suburban areas. Transitioned to North Carolina and finished high school here in Charlotte before transitioning to NC State University. Go Wolfpack.
Okay, here we go.
Going into college, I noticed, or let me backtrack a bit. One thing that I did notice when you talk about certain inequities, right? Transition from Newark, New Jersey to the South, right? And going to a predominantly white high school at the time.
Yeah.
It was a culture shock for me, right? There were certain things that I had no idea, right? Certain nuances that I was clearly unaware of. But I will say that it was extremely beneficial for me to have that experience prior to going to NC State University.
Yeah.
Because it was pretty much the same.
Right.
So it prepared me in many ways for that. But yeah, it was clear, it's glaring, and it has been even in my current journey, that there still are inequities, right? Because I get phone calls. I'm typically the last stop to whether or not someone's going to get access to therapy if their insurance carrier does not cover it.
Yeah.
So
yeah. let's talk about that. So can you tell us a little bit about how does a person begin working in the space that you're in? Because it's a critical component of accessing healthcare here in the United States that is nuanced, and the rest of the world that has healthcare available through their social structures.
Yeah, so my journey was a little different. Graduated from college and with a communications degree, minor in journalism. I do nothing clearly with that today. But so in trying to find my way, graduating from college, I went into business to business sales for cell phones, right? This is back when I might be dating myself, but back before Nextel merged with Sprint, I was doing business to business sales with them. Ended up getting burned out, work-wise with the sales. And my mom, who was actually in the space through medical billing, said, hey, I have a friend that works at a healthcare consulting company. I mean, they're starting at an entry level, but what do you think? And I'm like, I'll go to the career fair and see what happens.
Sure.
So
how old were you about this time?
24.
Okay.
24 years old. So went to the career fair, and started my journey. I ended up getting hired. Started at what I like to call the glorified mailroom. So literally, when you say starting from the bottom, working your way up to the top.
That's right. Started from the bottom. Now we're here.
Exactly. Right. So yeah, starting a glorified mailroom, literally scanning mail, putting them into the system. Work my way to getting onto the phones, to doing benefit verifications, to being a manager, to doing some roles that I actually didn't have an official title for, such as quality and things like that.
That's right.
All the way up to senior management, right? So yeah, so that was my journey. Wasn't necessarily one where I knew coming out of college, hey, this is what I wanted to do.
Right.
But once I got into the space and realized that there were certain pieces in certain ways that I can serve a community, it drew me in right away.
Oh gosh, I love that so much, because I feel like I say that almost every single interview, but it's so good because I think so many times young people, I mentor a lot of young people that are just starting their careers, and they're just like, well, I just want to get into that manager level role. And without realizing, when you look at somebody that has the title, right, may have the position that you want, you're looking at more of a finished product.
Right.
You don't realize that behind that title and the work responsibilities, the grind that took place to get there. And the grind is rarely, especially for us, the grind is rarely leapfrogs forward or a straight pathway. It is a little bit of this, a little bit of that, met somebody that did this, they liked me here, started doing that. And like you said, sometimes it's a lot of projects without the title.
Definitely so. Yeah, and it's funny you say that, because even to where I'm today, right, on the manufacturer side, that was more of the consultant side, I still had a couple of roles in between, right? So I moved to another company on the practice side, to get some more experience with hospitals, and then moved into a role where I was the director of strategic commercialization. So a few different paths, but ultimately lead me to where I wanted to go once I really realized, like, okay, this is my end goal, on the pharma side. So yeah, to your point though, that's you're looking at what, 2004 to 2023, so 19 years of experience.
Oh my gosh, yes, and that's how it happens. And I think it's so important that you allow yourself the space in reflection. I can say this, and I'm sure you would agree, that you allow yourself the space and the time to go through that journey, because you learn so much about yourself and what you like, what you don't like. You think when you get into it, oh, this is what I want to do. But then you start dibbling and dabbling in that space a little bit, and you're like, yeah, I like this, but I don't like that. So let me just pivot a little bit, because you started on the consulting side and then realized I really want to be more on the pharma manufacturing side. Mm-hmm. So I think that this is a great place to pivot and just to talk about, as you're going through that part of the journey where you're figuring things out and you're getting closer to what you are skilled at, right? Mm-hmm. And you're sort of in the flow. Mm-hmm. A lot of times it rarely is like you just get to the top and you get to stay there and you just get to coast, right? So this part of our journey is what I like to call endure. And essentially every journey comes with its twists and turns, but it's those twists and turns that actually, I believe, helps point us even more closely into the right direction for where we're supposed to be to further the impact that we have. And of course, we're focusing on how this impacts people of color and, all communities that are marginalized or minoritized. It could be LGBTQ, it could be, lots of different communities. Mm-hmm. So talk to us a little bit about what you may have had to endure on your journey.
So I'll go two different paths, sure. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But we'll bring it all back together. So the first of which is much of what you said earlier in regards to the path for us may not be as clear cut.
That's right.
So there's going to be, and my wife always says this to the kids sometimes, hey, you may have to work twice as hard to get what you deserve, right? Mm-hmm. And so much of what I mentioned earlier, right? There's things where, you're working and you may not be getting the title right off.
That's right.
Excuse me. But then you work your way to a place where you actually do reap the rewards for the work that you put in. Mm-hmm. The second part of that is, it's talking about endurance, is part of my journey is during my climb, right, my growth and succession to where I am now. I had an allergic reaction to anesthesia. I went in for a routine surgery to repair my Achilles, playing flag football. I thought I was in my youth and things happen.
As one does.
So I tore my Achilles, man, and went in for what was to be a routine surgery. Ended up being in the hospital for 26 days.
Wow.
I had an allergic reaction to an agent in the anesthesia called succinylcholine, which is called malignant hypothermia is what I had.
Oh, wow.
And essentially I coded 3 times, right? So I was, they had to revive me 3 times.
Wow.
During that process, I had kidney failure, liver failure,
my goodness.
And all of the like. But I'm here today, right? To tell
I know
story.
That's right.
So during that time in the hospital, I was trying to figure out what the lesson was in it, right? And where, it was something I did, like, man, God, what I do that was
That's
wrong, right?
I mean,
So,
you're just going along the path, trying to do the right thing, raising a family, working, and going for, you're doing what my husband does, is try to raise the nephews, right?
Yeah.
Think you still got it, and then all of a sudden, your life is hanging in the balance.
Literally.
Yeah.
Right? So, my way of figuring it out, I say, you know what? So, in my mind, I would always say this too shall pass, right? But I'm not necessarily I'm not a quote unquote Bible thumper, right?
Sure.
I'm like, what's the cool way to say this too shall pass? So with me, I decided to say AfterThis, right? And the date that everything transpired, well, I was almost no longer here, was 4/17 of 2017.
Wow.
So
can I just pause you? For those of you that have been following, 4/17 was the launch date for this show, Our Journey to Equity. Not 2017, but 4/17/2023, because 4/17 is also my birthday. And so when I first heard Jamil's story, I thought we have a connection here, and this is you're meant to share this. Yeah.
Wow.
I don't think I ever shared that with you.
You did not. I did not know that was the launch. Okay. Oh, that threw me off. Okay. So, wow. So congratulations. First and foremost.
Thank you.
And so this too shall pass after this. So I went to look up the scripture, right? So we'll bring it all full circle. Went and looked up the scripture for this too shall pass. And when I doing my searches, I found that it was 2 Corinthians 4:17.
Wow.
Right? So 4:17 is the date that everything transpired. 2 Corinthians 4:17 is essentially what AfterThis means. So this is why you'll see 417 and on certain things, right? Like on the shirts and AfterThis and so on and so forth. But bringing it all back full circle, what I learned from that is servitude, right? Because in that moment when I was in the hospital, there were a multitude of doctors, nurses, and the like that were actually serving me because I coded and I was out for so long. I had rhabdo, which broke down all my muscle tissue. So literally, I couldn't scratch my face. How I figured out that I was having issues is I'm laying in the bed and my wife is next to me. My parents are there as well, and you know, I'm like, my face is itching. So in my mind is saying, oh, just scratch your face.
Right, scratch your face.
My body is saying no, right?
Wow.
So I'm looking at her and I'm looking at my parents like, so is it something that you guys aren't telling me, right? So, you know, they clearly, you know, talked to me about rhabdo and so on and so forth. So eventually, of course, I got the muscle strength back, but I had to go through physical and occupational therapy while having a cast on my leg from the repair for my Achilles.
Oh, I forgot about the Achilles.
Yeah.
So that became so secondary,
Yeah.
hearing everything else that you went through. I mean, Jamil, so you are in a completely different physical state where your body has basically broken down to its lowest possible denominator. And I'm assuming, because of how your Achilles tore in the first place, that when you went into the hospital, you were, from an emotional, mental state of mind and physically, you were the strong one, right?
Right.
The leader of the pack, the strong one in the family. You know, I'm gonna beat these kids and show these nephews, you know what I'm saying, what it is. And then in a matter of time, you just flip and all of a sudden you're the dependent on everybody else.
Right.
Tell us about that.
Oh man, dependent is an understatement. So like I said, I had to go through both occupational and physical therapy during my journey in the hospital, and even after, right? So even when I came home, I still had physical therapists come to the house and help me with, you know, the most minuscule things that you probably wouldn't even think, like brushing your teeth, right? Like, so that's a natural, hey, I can get up, it's the normal thing. I go put the toothpaste, you know, and do what I need to do. But in my case, I didn't have the physicality to be able to do that. To relying on, you know, even my kids sometimes to be able to put my socks on, right? Like I can't put my socks on. Like, hey, kids, can y'all come and help Dad put his socks on? Clearly, my wife, right, helping me to get in and out of the shower and think like I had to have a shower chair to take a shower.
Yes.
I mean, because I couldn't stand for a long time. I had to cover the cast that's still in my leg. It's so many things that I was dependent upon people for. So while I say servitude was one thing, it was also an extremely humbling situation as well. And it taught me many things about myself and people in that process, in that 26 days. And then thereafter, right? So every time I tell this story, there's something else that comes to mind. I'm like, oh man, I didn't even think about that, right? So like we just were talking about, I said, asking the kids to help me put my socks on. It came to mind as I'm talking through it with you. But it was a learning experience, to say the least, and a humbling experience.
So as you are, you know, feeling humbled through this experience, and I imagine your family dynamics have changed a lot to, you know, try to adapt for this change. You also are thinking through AfterThis, right? Like there is something beyond this. Can you tell us, like, from a mental health and well-being standpoint, how you got through this period? You know, tell us how you got through.
Yeah, so a lot of it was, and so at the same time, I'm still trying to figure out work too, right? So there's the work and the personal piece of it. So yeah, a lot of it was the AfterThis, this too shall pass, right? So every time I would get into a space where it's the woe was me, right? Like, like I said earlier, like, what did I do? I didn't even do anything. I was just playing flag football. I was doing everything right, doing what I need to do career-wise and, you know, for the family. There was always this inkling of like, oh, I mean, it's all right. Just keep it pushing. Like whatever is going on is just momentary. Just say, hey, this is the next thing. This is the next thing. This is the next thing. So what I found myself in, you know, kind of like the slogan for even like the brand of After This, you know, is whatever you're experiencing is only momentary. Simply say to yourself, after this, and then insert the next phrase for what you want to do. So in my case, it's like, after this, I'm back to work, or after this, I'm going to walk a mile. After this, I'm going to run, or after, you know, all of those pieces. And so that was the way I got through it. Realistically, you know, there were some days that weren't as easy. Right? But at its very core, it was simply just, okay, so after this, what are you going to do? Because one thing, bringing it all the way back to the growing up where I grew up at, is growing up in an urban environment, you don't in many ways get to fold, right? You are tasked with learning how to either address conflict or not to address conflict, because you can't get away from it, right? Like the block that I lived on the corner of my block is where, you know, everyone would congregate to do whatever those activities were, right? So I had to walk past that to go to school, because we walked to school. So, you know, you had to figure out how to navigate certain environments and certain things, some of which were tough, some things that you saw that you probably shouldn't have seen at certain ages. But through all that, you realize that you don't get to quit or fold, as we like to say, on anything. So even when I'm in a hospital and I'm getting dialysis, right, because I had kidney failure, and I'm laying in the bed and my kids are there, I can't necessarily say, oh, daddy is not feeling well. Like, I'm still trying to joke with them to reassure them that I'm okay.
I'm going to be okay.
Even though in the back end, I'm like, oh, man.
Am I going to be okay?
Am I going to make it out of here? Right? Like,
man,
so, you know, it always goes full circle to your upbringing, your experiences, and then, you know, fast forward to what your current state is.
Jamil, can't we just unpack? So you're, as an adolescent, as a young kid, having to endure in the neighborhood that you grew up in, knowing that I have to keep going, I can't just quit. I have to keep going, I can't just quit. You don't realize how sometimes those the smallest experiences that you have as a child are actually preparing you for something down the line that you have no way of knowing that that's coming.
Right.
But I believe, just from listening to your story and your journey, that seed of you enduring in that neighborhood and in that environment, then moving to a, you know, suburban neighborhood that was mixed race, and it's like, it's not the same as growing up in a black neighborhood, right? Having to endure through that prepared you for NC State. And then just the mindset, that mindset, I talked about this previously, you know, knowledge becomes a weapon in your hand. And that can also be applied to mindset, where your mindset is actually a tool that can help you get through. And can I just tell you, I'm about to be like, look, after these kids stop acting crazy, after this, I'm going to go lay down. After this, it's going to be all right. It's going to be better. I mean, that's really powerful.
No, really true. And it's true though, right? I mean, it puts you in a place where, it puts you in a place where you figure out that everything is only a moment in time, right? Like even this conversation is great, it's beautiful. I mean, thoroughly enjoying it, by the way. You know, we'll get through this conversation, we'll go back to our normal day to day, but then you also take the time to reflect and say, man, after this, I was able to engage with someone who I met through a program, right, that I was doing from a leadership perspective. And, you know, we can build continue to build a relationship professionally with our brands, right? It's so many components that even with that, just that moment in time, that spawns another long interaction and growth and, you know, connection that we probably wouldn't have been able to do in that moment.
That's right. That's so powerful. And I think it's a great transition point to the next part of our journey, which is evolve, and thinking about how everything that you have been through has really helped evolve your work and what you're doing. And, you know, as we think about that mental strength that comes from knowing that the experience that you're having in the moment is truly a moment. This will pass. After this, there's something else, right? That is just, I am just pulling all kinds of strength from that right now. And I hope that for those of you that are either watching or listening, you're also being strengthened and pulling strength from that. And I think that's also the power of us being able to share our stories and share our journeys together.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about how you have evolved as a part of your journey and how your work has evolved.
Wow. So professionally, going back to servitude, right? A huge part of my day is not necessarily on the forefront, right? Like I'm not necessarily into engaging with patients like that, but I am making decisions that directly impact patients, right? So for me, that servitude comes in a multitude of ways. The product that I actually support, I'll say, is an oncology product for ovarian and prostate cancer. Again, full circle moment, why it was important to me to kind of go into oncology and why I decided to go back and get a master's degree in kinesiology is 3 of my grandparents passed away from cancer, right? So now I work in the cancer space, one of which had prostate cancer, right? So I have the ability to assist them with getting access to therapy that will elongate their life. So again, full circle. I'm in a space that allows me the opportunity to do that. So professionally serving those patients and or providers to help patients get access to therapy. Personally, right, going into the AfterThis brand, I do a message every Friday on all of my socials, and we'll talk about that later, but it's called 52 Fridays, and I try to provide positivity, encouragement, and self-awareness to anyone who's listening, right, which is the core value of mission of what I'm trying to do. So yeah, man, it's really just, and during that message, I always say at the end, you never know, right? So live, good people, live. One thing that I took through all of my journeys, or I learned through all of my journeys, is we do so much for everyone else, but we never take the moment to live.
Ooh, so good.
And so, you know, and I say good people, of course, right? But everyone is good in their own right. But, you know, take a moment to live. Take a moment to enjoy. Take a moment to smell grass getting cut, right? One of the things when I rolled out of the hospital for the first time is I was in there for 26 days. I didn't go outside. I rolled out and the first thing I smelled was cut grass.
Wow.
And I'm like, what? I've been missing this.
Oh, wow.
So just live. Just take a moment to live. Enjoy life. Because you never know, right? I went in for a routine surgery. And I was almost no longer here.
Wow.
So live.
Do you think that you would have chosen oncology as a pathway had it not been for this experience and for you really reevaluating how you wanted to live?
Yes, because of my grandparents.
Okay. So you were already thinking on that pathway. I was.
So I went back to get my master's degree in kinesiology because in my mind I was going to go into therapy for patients who had cancer. So I was in my mind, I wanted to open up a cancer rehab and, you know, the physicality of it all, primarily because my paternal grandfather ran marathons his whole life. So seeing him continuously exercise, and even when he got diagnosed with cancer, them saying, you know, had he not been the physical conditioning that he was in, it could have been a different story, right? He lived well beyond beating prostate cancer. He ultimately passed away from a different type of cancer, but that was my thought process. I would get a master's degree in kinesiology, open up its cancer rehab. So this kind of spills into what that ultimate goal was. I'm just doing it on the pharma side of things.
Right. Oh, that's a great mindset. I mean, listen, if we need some mindset nuggets, you need to be following Jamil. We'll get his socials in just a minute. But again, it's that mindset that, you know, you think that your pathway is going to be this one thing, this one goal, this one position, this one role, right? But when you allow yourself to live and just experience your life and allow yourself to pivot, right? And understand that, you know what, you might not be operating a therapy center, a physical therapy center for oncology patients, but you are making sure oncology patients still have access, right? And advocating for them. And are you thinking about this from a different lens? Has the lens of your work changed at all?
Yes, definitely so, because because the patient population is elderly patients, right? Most of those patients are between, at least that come through my area of the business, is 65 to 84, right? So I'm thinking about my grandparents in that moment, right? Because they are not typically as technologically savvy, right, as you or I would be, in navigating online portals and things of that nature. So for me, it's always thinking about the patient journey. What exactly is happening in the patient journey, and making sure that in most ways and all ways that I can, that I'm facilitating the moments that matter, right? So when it's time, when they get the diagnosis, and then now they're trying to figure out how I'm going to afford the medication, right? Am I making it as easy as possible, or am I giving them alternative means to access to therapy? During this difficult time, you just been diagnosed with cancer. Right. Most times, these patients, by the time they get to us, have gone through chemotherapy, right? So they've gone through platinum-based chemotherapy, and now they're coming to us as a maintenance therapy drug to kind of keep them moving forward until potentially their next round of chemotherapy. So it's kind of like a gateway. So for that, it's definitely something that's impactful for me, and again, because of the age range of these patients, both female and male, right, ovarian and prostate, it keeps me thinking about, hey, what would I do if this was my grandparent? Because in reality, it was. Right, so,
right, it absolutely was.
It's definitely impactful in that way.
Yeah, and I would say also, it reminds me so much of how important having access is, especially for communities of color, how important access was for you in a very pivotal moment when your life was on the line, and you didn't need somebody to be saying, well, we don't know if we can do some of these treatments because we don't know if he's going to qualify, right? And so I imagine that with your work, you're probably thinking about it a lot through a culmination of all of your experiences, both with your grandparents and because there is something that needs to happen after this, right? Okay, so I think that this is a great time to transition into how we can elevate you. So we've learned about your journey. We've learned about just all the things that have happened, not all of the things, but many of the things that have happened along your life that have led you to where you are today and how you're approaching your work. So like we mentioned before, we can really learn a lot when we elevate one another. How can we as a community elevate you?
Oh man, I guess we can start by follow me on all socials, right?
Sure. Share your socials.
So all socials are AfterThis, AfterThis 417, all one word. That's on Instagram, Twitter. It's AfterThis LLC on Facebook. YouTube is AfterThis 417 if you do the AfterThis 417. And just like, share, subscribe, and invite me to, if you have any speaking engagements, I'm open to it. I'm open to sharing my story and just making sure that I'm providing the positivity and awareness to the folks out there.
Well, what a powerful story to share. What a powerful story that we all really need to know as a person of color who, in this country specifically, you have to learn how to endure in order to survive. You have to learn how to endure to, thrive within the systems that were created so that we would not thrive. It helps to be partnered with really powerful people who can help share some of their mindset, some of these nuggets. I mean, thank you for sharing these nuggets with us to help us think about, what happens after this, right? So I might be going through something, but after this, it's going to be better, right? After this, I'm going to be stronger. I'm going to be wiser. I'm going to be more fulfilled. So thank you so much, Jamil. Please follow Jamil. We have his socials. Please make sure you tune in on Fridays to get more of that, just mental strength and encouragement. Such a powerful, wonderful human being to be connected to. And if you are interested in learning more and hearing more journeys on this journey to equity, which as you can see is very diverse, a lot of different ways that many of our friends that we have interviewed and encountered have come about into the health equity work and the health equity field and healthcare in general. Please follow us at Our Journey to Equity, or you can just hit us up on our website, www.ourjourneytoequity.com. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you on the next journey.
Let's continue to amplify the voices of those fighting for equity and create a better future together. Stay connected with us by visiting our website, ourjourneytoequity.com, where you can access previous episodes, resources, and ways to get involved. Thank you for being part of Our Journey to Equity.